Okay, so welcome to one and all. Thank you for joining us on this wonderful journey called the Jewish Course of Why. We're going to have a wonderful time together. A little bit of introduction for tonight, class one. I hope you guys had supper and something to eat and use the restroom. Here we had a wonderful deluxe dinner. It is also a special date to mark the first class. It is the day that we moved into this house exactly 5 years ago. So mazel tov to that. That's when we started our Chabad in Colony itself. Today, plus, in addition, today is the Rebbe's father's yahrzeit, who was the rabbi, the chief rabbi of Ukraine. And hopefully this is a day of blessings for all those in Ukraine and peace around the world. Thank you. Amen. A few thank yous. First of all, thank you for everyone that came, those who are on Zoom. I got to meet you in person. And those who are in person, I got to meet you in person. Today's class, the course is generously sponsored by Kathy in honor of the yahrzeit of her husband, Dr. Larry Buckwalter, whose Hebrew name is Aryeh ben Avram Halevi, and should be a blessing to you and your family. Thank you for making this happen. And as well, our first class, as we have a lot of new participants, which makes this very exciting, more interesting, is thank you to Linda Grimm for sponsoring the first class in honor of her brother, Marvin Baum. So now that we got our thank yous in place, that's a good way to start a course, a Jewish course. You always have to be grateful for our blessings. And now we're not yet using our textbooks, but you can have them open. You take a drink. We are going to have a few house rules. So how does this work? We're going to aim. Some of you have taken other courses with us before. We're going to do things a little different because this course is better than the rest. Number one, it's going to be shorter. So we're going to really try to aim for an hour. Anybody has questions afterwards, we'll stay a little bit online and in person, but we're going to try to keep it an hour to respect everyone's time. We're also going to be skipping, skipping rocks, stepping from one to the next. Some of our courses restricted to one topic. As you've seen, these 50 questions, which we're going to take our journey together on, are not all the same topic. They were actually submitted by students. Listen closely to this, because I want you to use your pens for this. You can actually use your pens in response to my email later tonight. But this course, which we're using from the JLI Learning Institute, they've had many courses, and many times students said, well, why don't we talk about this? Why don't we talk about that? So they made one course. They asked students to submit as many questions as possible. They selected 50 of their most interesting and pressing questions, and that is what this course is based on. I mentioned to some of you in person, I prepared this, and I realized that there's so much wonderful stuff to learn. We are not going to run with the time. We're going to spend time in the right fashion. But to cover all 50 in this course, we're not going to be able to. We're probably going to have this 5 sessions getting us closer to Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, high holiday time, and then another opportunity later in the year, which will be notified to finish up the rest of the questions. Well, we have I don't know, go open the door and find out what it is. Another important thing about asking questions, we're trying to give a little more time for discussion than other classes, but still we want to keep with the time. Important to recognize this is not like a little mom's Hebrew school. We take questions seriously. So you have a question that's on topic, we will try to address it. If it's a question that is not as related, we'll happy to speak about it perhaps at another time. So it's a safe environment. Ask the questions. Nothing's a stupid question. Please, but we will try to keep to that time. Few more little ground rules is that, some people said, oh, how are you going to answer all these questions? So I'm going to say something quite radical. I'm not going to answer any of these questions. We are going to some extent, but we're going to at least give a new perspective to many areas of life and Jewish life. And I think you will very much enjoy it. A lot of insight into areas of, as we said, some really important and interesting questions about life. Without further ado, question one. Is everyone ready? Is that a thumbs up from those on live? Okay, so everyone's got the ground rules of this journey. Question one. Why? The course is named the course of why. And the very first question is, why ask why? So I'll tell you a little story. There was once a fellow who met a Jewish guy named Yankel. Jewish guy named Yankel. And he asked Yankel, why do Jews ask so many questions about so many things? And then how do they answer the questions? With a question. So he turns to Yankel and says, you have all these questions, and the way the Jews always answer these questions are with another question. So what did Yankel say? Why not? Okay, it's not a funny joke, but we are going, it is a good joke? Okay, good. I'm now going to share my screen. Important, if you cannot see the screen, hopefully those in person can see the screen, hopefully those on Zoom is. I do want you to tell me if you can see the screen, but even if you cannot fully see the screen, I think you're going to do a pretty good job of enjoying this. Good. The people on Zoom, you're going to just give me a little. Okay, you guys can see the screen? What does it say? The course of why, lesson one? Good, okay. So without further ado, it sounds like a funny question that we're going to be asking. But as you see on the screen, we're going to be touching many different subjects: theology, identity, history, Jewish law, and so many other customs. So we have a lot to discuss. Our first question, as we just said, is why ask why? Isn't Judaism a belief system? Does everyone understand the question? Good. Well, I'm just going to explain it just so we really appreciate the question. Asking why in a religion perhaps is not the right place to ask questions. Why? Because it is a belief or faith. So how do you ask questions? It's not a logical discussion, or maybe it is. We're going to discuss this, but if Judaism is a religion and a faith, what does it mean that we ask why? Now, I'm going to say, kind of propose something to everybody. Perhaps we can propose that really, ideally, in an ideal pure faith, people don't ask why. But people are imperfect, and they have curiosity, and they have intellectual questions, or maybe emotional questions, questions coming from the heart, questions coming from the mind. Therefore, they ask, why this, why that? So perhaps it's like a concession. Really, in ideal Judaism, no, the person has pure faith doesn't have any questions. But to make a concession to someone's at a lower space or imperfect, which we all are, then we can invite questions like why. Do you guys agree to that premise or not? Okay, some people say that it's a concession. Well, I'm going to propose that it isn't, and you're going to test this against the next text we're going to read, which is the text from Maimonides. Now, before we read this text, look at the screen. Anybody heard of the Moken people? Moken? Okay, they are off an island off Thailand, and there's certain parts of language that do not have words for. Want, they don't got a word for want. Take, you know, you've heard of this.
I'm going to need a text if I can.
Okay, good. Some of this is on the screen. Mushla, when you pass them, please. Book, take this book. I'm going to share this book. Right there. Thank you very much.
To do what?
They need a book.
Extra book here.
Okay, let's keep the boat rolling. Okay, good. You can take two. You can take two. Good. Okay, so without further ado, who remembers the Mokens? There's certain words they don't have in their vocabulary. Take, mine. You can imagine this is a very unique society. In our language, we have those words. In fact, you can even imagine that in certain societies, the word polite may not be part of the vocabulary. But in an ideal Judaism, is why a word or not? You got my question? Religion isn't just something that if it makes sense, it's something that's truth. It's the ultimate truth. So even if you don't understand it, it's still true. So till now we have proposed that it's a concession for the imperfect person, which we all are. We all have curiosities, we all have questions, and that is the reason why we take why into consideration. This is the premise of the entire course. So it is the introduction question. Well, the Jews, we say why and why again. So before we look at this next screen, I'm just gonna go back. We're gonna now ask someone to read. We're gonna ask someone on Zoom to read. Hopefully we can hear you here. I think we've heard you till now, so we're gonna be able to hear them those on Zoom. And I'm just gonna go, we're gonna go with Nancy, number 1. We're gonna be on page 2 in your books, text 1. This is a word from Maimonides, a medieval rabbi who was the physician to the Sultan of Egypt, a great rabbi, a great Jewish codifier, philosopher, and a master doctor and scientist. So Maimonides is well accepted in all Jewish communities. And now we will read his text. And Nancy, you will be reading this.
English, I hope.
Please, yes. Only
Okay.
read English.
Thank you.
There's a special test at the end for those who want to do Hebrew to get extra points.
All right. Ready? Okay.
Yep.
Although all of the super rational laws in the Torah are decrees, as I've explained elsewhere, it is appropriate to meditate upon them and wherever possible, provide a rationale. Indeed, the sages said that King Solomon understood many of the rationales for all the super rational statutes of the Torah.
Beautiful. Thank you. And if you can keep yourself muted so that we can continue, everyone can hear. So Nancy, thank you for reading that text. I don't know if today we won't get to read a text, but throughout the course, we're going to try to keep it everyone's same seats. So we'll figure it out. People will raise their hands. So first of all, can everyone hear me in the back? Is anybody cold? Good. Not me. All right. So now that everyone can see, we are dissecting what Maimonides just said. So follow along on the screens or listen to my voice. There are many commandments, many mitzvahs, doctrines, decrees, laws, you can name what you want to call it, mitzvahs in the Torah. Maimonides says you can boil them down to 2 groups. The first one, if you're writing down with a pen, you can spell it out. You want to take notes, there's papers. If you want a paper, there's more papers. You want to write in your book, it's your book to keep. I'm going to pass out. You guys have pens. No mark, no test. This is just for your own. If you actually want to gain information, you can do what you want. Every student as they wish. Those on Zoom, you're doing well, right? So Maimonides says 2 groups, 2 types of mitzvahs. One is called mishpatim in Hebrew, which is the rational laws. And then there is a separate group called chukim, which is super rational laws. So let's give some examples. Mishpatim, the first category of commandments, are mitzvot that one may have come up with on his own, even if not given by God at Sinai. Who can give me examples of rational mitzvot that maybe society would have come up with without a God? I like that. That's a great one. That's a borderline one in the certain sect. But in general, I want to say that Linda made a great point. She said tzedakah, charity. Till recent times, people were not charitable. It's an introduction of Abraham to the world, but it took many, many years. Today, you get rewarded if you give charity, you get off your taxes. In 1,000 years ago, if you gave charity, you were looked as a gullible, foolish person, giving away your hard-earned money to someone that did not deserve it. But I like that. It's a think. It provokes my thoughts. Again, if anybody's on Zoom, you can unmute and share in, but I'm going to ask anybody else. Some of the basic 10 commandments: don't steal, don't kill. These are basic. Hopefully, society as a whole that wants to live together will come up with these on their own. That is one group of mitzvahs. The second group of mitzvahs, chukim, are mitzvahs that are super rational. For example, kosher law. Some people think kosher is healthy. It may be healthy in certain circumstances. You can eat a lot of kosher food and gain a lot of weight. cheesecake could be kosher, it isn't so healthy, and it tastes good. The bottom line is that kosher, you can give this interpretation or not, that interpretation. At the end of the day, kosher, the diet the Torah prescribes, is super rational. It is not, don't kill, don't steal. It is a God-given commandment. On our own, we would never come up with 2 different sinks and 2 different ovens for meat and milk. Trust me. Ask the women and they'll understand, they'll tell you all about it. I'm going to give you one more example. We can go through all that. We're moving on. So one more for the chukim category, second category, which is super rational, which is shatnez. Does anybody know what shatnez is? Shatnez, it's not an English word, it's a Hebrew word. Shatnez is a unique, it's about your dress. We talked about what you eat, kosher food. Now I'm giving you an example of, and we're not talking about laws of Jewish modesty, of dress. We're talking about the type of clothing you wear. Wool and linen. Who wear? Raise your hand if you're wearing something wool. Okay. Raise your hand if you're wearing something linen. Okay, good. So in Judaism, you can wear wool and linen, both. You can wear a woolen jacket and linen pants or anything, but a garment that is made out of a combination of both wool and linen, do not wear, and that is called the mitzvah of shatnez. Now, you can give me this explanation, or maybe some mystical and wonderful explanation, but this is called a chok. This is called a super rational mitzvah. Now, yes, if you have a question.
Would a super rational be going to synagogue?
Okay, I like that. So that's a great question for the crowd. Who thinks going to synagogue, is that super rational?
You don't think of doing that.
I would say the sense of community, there's elements of synagogue that are something that actually Jewish community is very unique because we have a community built in, But you're right, there are elements of it that may be more, that's a great question. So there are borderline mitzvahs, but this is the main cutting edge division, 2 types of mitzvah that Maimonides says. Now, I'm going to take a question in a moment. Before we get into what Maimonides meant in this text, I want to give a little bit. It seems like here the mishpatim mitzvahs are easier to do because you connect with them. If I would ask a poll here, what are easier for people to perform? Mitzvahs that make sense to them or mitzvahs that don't make sense to them? Makes sense. That's easier to fulfill. It's more of a leap of faith to do the mitzvahs that are super rational. I want to just give a little different wrap, just for a second, to these mitzvahs, which is the kosher symbol here on the screen. And that is that in a relationship, we'll give a relationship, everyone has maybe different relationships there, parents, children, mother, child, however you want to look at it, spouse, people living together, however you want to look at different groups of mitzvot. Let's go through relationships. Let's say 2 people, when we have a marriage example. Don't worry about the exact scenario. Parents or children, it could be friends. Let's say they both like vanilla ice cream. So they go out for ice cream. Great. Then one of them has no interest in going to a ball game. No interest whatsoever. And the other one wants to go to the ball game. And they go along to the ball game. Maybe no present company into this, but let's just say this example. It's not such a fantastic example. It's a regular, good life example. Where do you see that they're married? Where do you see that there's a relationship? In the ice cream story or in the baseball game? Right, in the baseball game. That's what shows us a real relationship. If they're just both doing what they like to do, you can almost separate them and they can eat ice cream on their own. Right? Maybe it's nicer to eat it with others. But what shows in the relationship, which is deeper than a friendship or a business deal or a partnership, but it's a marriage, it's a child, and the children want to do something, the parents go along with it. It's because it's an eternal, a deeper relationship. So in our relationship with God as well, it is more difficult to do the supernatural mitzvahs, but that is where we show our love and that it's a relationship with God. Not only, you heard about him, but no, we're in a relationship with him. That's where you get to show your love in your relationship with your friend, your spouse, your your children, your parents, and you go beyond what is regular for you. So those are really the most, in a certain way, special mitzvahs. But anyhow, I'm going to cap, quick question, I'm going to carry on. Cap, do you have your question?
Yeah. Why can't you read full and time? Nobody's ever answered my question. I've asked rabbis.
Okay, good. So she has this question.
You have to answer it.
I love this. I've just established that this is a mitzvah which we don't have. I can after class give you a spiritual reason for it, but not for now because we're going to keep the ball rolling. But it is part of the category of mitzvot which we don't fully understand.
No.
Sam is going to give an interpretation after class. Hold on, we're going to keep the ball rolling. So, without further ado, we have now read Maimonides' text 800 years ago. You have a question. If you guys have a question, you can ask.
Rabbi? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Is there more agreement in Judaism, within Judaism, on the rational, and there's much more disagreement on the super rational?
This is a great question. We're going to have 50 questions. We're going to talk a little about some of the disagreements in Judaism a little later on. But today we're going to keep to the subject, if that's fine with you, okay? Because otherwise, I promise you, every question leads to another question, which is why there are 50 questions. Moving on, we are now have this from Maimonides. Now, listen closely to what we're going to do. Maimonides says, category 1 of the rational laws we can understand. What about the category 2? Should we attempt to meditate and understand the second group of mitzvot, which is called chukim, super rational laws? Maimonides says quite clearly, we're going to back up that slide, that even the mitzvot, like Kathy's wondering, Kathy, this is for you. Why can't we mix wool and linen? And Sam has his answer. That's good. Maimonides is saying it's not a concession to ask why on the irrational mitzvahs. It is actually proper. You may not get the correct answer. You may not know the full truth, but it is correct, Maimonides says, for a person to go ahead, and it is an ideal Judaism. It's not a concession to the imperfect person, but it is an ideal Judaism to go ahead and question things. And that is really the basis for our entire course, right? Now, before we look at the bottom of page 2, who here would like to read the question for discussion? I'm going to go in order just to make this simple. You're going to read the first question. Everyone will eventually get.
What's the benefit of contemplating rationales of God's law?
So now that we say that it is an ideal thing, Maimonides says encourages this. It is not an imperfect thing or an unideal situation. It's the right thing to ask. What is the benefits, in your opinion, of asking questions? This is not a hard question. I would love to hear we're going to keep this quick though. Can anybody share with me yes, go for it.
It makes the community work together.
Good. It makes the community work together. I like that. Any other people like to share something? Yes.
You ask questions, you get to learn new things.
Get to learn new things. Very good. Okay, good. Any other points? Those joining on Zoom? Okay, we covered some of the good qualities of asking questions. But I'm going to suggest something very, very important. And that is God created us by design. We are not by mistake. That is a premise to belief in God. We believe God created the world. We are not here by mistake. If that is the case, that is all parts of us, including our curiosity, our intellectual stimulus. What bothers us is not a mistake. It is not an error. It is this by design. So to say that, oh, you're meant to just do the motions, but not understand it, your mind, that would be almost, I'm going to say something radical here, almost denying God's design of the entirety of the person, including his mind. So asking questions is an important thing. It's not only suggested if you have questions, well, we'll deal with, there's something called troubleshooting. If you got trouble with your computer, you got to go to that. And no, in Judaism, it's not troubleshooting to ask questions. It's invited. It's important, because we believe that by design, God gave us intellect. So this is very important. Our relationship with God is not wholesome if it says, not the mind. You can do the right thing, you can act nicely, but your mind, there are certain things, your mind has no relationship with God. God wants a relationship with our entirety of the person. And that is why we need to ask questions. And welcome, therefore, to the questions of why. What is the most celebrated Jewish holiday? Who thinks they know in America today? Today. Who said Passover? Good. Anybody else? Hanukkah is a good next. Yom Kippur, I like that. Okay, so we have maybe the top three. Shabbat. It is the best. It's every week. It's you don't have to wait till Passover for dinner. But here we have dinner every night. But anyhow, bottom line is that those are all good. But I'm not sure which one's the top. But Passover is a major holiday that is celebrated in all types of, whether people are super religious or not. Passover Seder, you eat matzah, you have get together with family, more matzah, so more charosot, whatever you do. But that is a very celebrated holiday. If you know that is the birth of the Jewish people, they left Egypt. That is when we started as a nation. We later got the Torah at Mount Sinai, but so it's a foundational holiday, Passover. The Seder is like setting in motion everything that we need to know. And a key element of the Seder is the story, the questions. In fact, there are certain customs we do at the Seder, which we don't do other times of the year, that are only there so people should ask questions. For example, dipping a vegetable into salt water. That is in Jewish law and halacha embedded in order that someone should ask a question. And the youngest at the Seder, the children, are there to ask the questions. So questions are not being an unideal Judaism. It is the way we transmit Judaism, because that is what brings the wholesomeness of the person. The person is able to use his intellect, question back and forth, and answer. They're able to internalize the messages more. And it's actually built in the Torah, in the Bible, not only in the Haggadah, the actual Torah. We just read it a few weeks ago. The Torah says, the child should ask, and you should give him an answer. So this is not an unideal Judaism. This is the way it's meant to be. Okay,
Rabbi, I have a question.
sure.
Is there a difference between belief and knowing?
Good. I love that question. Belief and knowing. So as this course continues, maybe we'll get more to that. There is a difference between belief and knowing. And right now, it's beyond this question. So remember that, jot it down. We'll maybe get to that a little later. Before we get to our next slide, we're going to hear, and hopefully we'll read this. I'm going to need some that reads loudly and swiftly, because it's a little long, the text, but it's very, very important. And this is from a contemporary rabbi from Great Britain. He's one of my favorite rabbis. He was the chief rabbi of Great Britain. He actually passed away during COVID to cancer. His name is Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. Anybody heard of him before? Very important rabbi, a great advocate for Judaism and the international community as well. So, Jonathan Sacks says, what makes a question kosher? We've already established and almost ad nauseum that questions are good. Everyone knows a question, you're allowed to ask questions. But what qualifies a question to be kosher? And you're going to see what I mean in a moment. So here are the three conditions for a Jewish question. Who would like to read text 2? Are we going in order? Are you able to read loud and clear?
I'll try.
Okay, go for it. We're on text 2, which is on page 3.
There are three conditions, though, for asking a Jewish question. First is that we seek genuinely to learn, not to doubt, ridicule, dismiss, reject. That is what the wicked son of the Haggadah does. He asks not out of the desire to understand, but as the prelude to walking away.
Beautiful. So that's the first condition. Are you looking to learn or to walk away? So very often, I learned this when I was in rabbinical college. Very interesting thing. There was a rabbi that said some people don't have questions; they have answers. And he said they may say their answers in the form of a question, but it's actually an answer to their behavior. It is not actually a question. They're actually interested to know. If someone asks you what time it is, they're interested in knowing what time it is. If they're not going to say, "Oh, well, you don't have a watch. Why do you have a watch?" They're actually interested in knowing what the answer is. So that's one type of question. It's not a very deep question, but some people, they may formulate their words as questions, but it's actually not a question. It's actually an answer or an excuse. So why don't they do something? You'll see a parent and a child, and the parent asks the kid to clean the room or something. What's the kid going to say? "Oh, well, you didn't do this for me," or why didn't you do X, Y, and Z? You don't clean your room. Are they interested to know why the parent, for an answer for the parents? No, it's an excuse why they don't want to clean the room, right? And that often can even lead into religion. We're not going to touch this, certainly not today, but people ask why the Holocaust happened. It's a great question. It's a tough question. There is no answer to the question. Okay? There is no answer to the question. We don't understand why such a thing can happen, and we'll never understand. And thank God we don't understand. But what some people ask the question with an interest to learn a little bit. Some people ask the question as an excuse. I don't anyways believe in God because how could the Holocaust happen? That is not a question. That is an answer or an excuse to their behavior. So our first condition to a kosher question, that was my joke, the kosher question, is someone seeking to learn, or is it an answer or an excuse? Okay, keep on reading. You know what? We'll let you read also, but let's get more people to read tonight. Bill, you read next. Is that okay? We'll keep. No, we're going to give someone on Zoom. Bill, you'll be reading the third paragraph. Who would like to read the second paragraph? Didn't get to read yet. John, you on? Okay, so you got to unmute yourself and take it away. Second paragraph.
Okay. Second is that we accept limits to our understanding. Not everything is intelligible at any given moment. There were scientists at the beginning of the 20th century who believed that virtually every major discovery had already been made, not suspecting that the next 100 years would give rise to Einstein's relativity theory, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, Gödel's theorem, proof of the Big Bang origin of the universe, the discovery of DNA, and the decoding of the human genome. In relation to Torah, many German and American Jews in the 19th century could not understand Jewish prayers for a return to Zion and deleted them from the prayer book. These facts should induce in us a certain humility. Not every scientific orthodoxy survives the test of time. Not everything in Judaism that we do not understand is unintelligible. The very features of Jewish life one generation finds difficult, the next generation may find the most meaningful of all. Faith is not opposed to questions, but it is opposed to the shallow certainty that what we understand is all there is.
Stop right there. This is the most important of the three. Is that at the end of the day, we are limited. And even science knows this. You saw scientists at the beginning of the 19th century felt there was no more major discoveries to make. We laugh at that today. And you know what? There's nothing to laugh at. They weren't stupid people. But we should have the humility to understand. I'm going to ask everyone a question, okay? Here's the question. Don't answer, just raise your hand. Who thinks they know? I'm going to ask the question like this. You ready? Who thinks what they don't know is more than what they do know? Okay, good. That is a very good place to be. Because first of all, you're in the position to study more, to gain, to grow. But number two is we are limited beings. We are by definition limited. And God is infinite. So I love this last line. Faith is not opposed to questions, but it is opposed to the shallow certainty that we understand. What we understand is all there is. So if we don't understand it, it doesn't exist. People, if you would have asked them before airplanes were invented or discovered, whatever you want to call it, will you ever fly in the air? You won't be attached to the ground. You'll be up in the air. They would laugh at you. That's ridiculous. Well, we are, for our circumstance, we're able to say, oh, that we can't relate to that. But just because you don't understand something doesn't mean it's true or not true. It doesn't mean that it exists or doesn't exist. Premise 2. That is the most important premise. The Rebbe always, in letters, especially when you would write response in English to people that had a lot of questions, he would go back to this, that by definition, we are on a journey, a relationship with God. We should ask questions. We should inquire. Question number 1 has to be kosher because it's, you're looking to seek, you're looking to learn. Number 2, this main premise is that by definition, if you walk into asking questions and you think that if you don't understand it at the end, it's wrong or right,